and in so-called friendly fire. McChrystal was at the center of the military cover-up. This is what Pat Tillman's mother, Mary, had to say about McChrystal when we spoke with her 2 years ago. I asked her about a memo that McChrystal wrote regarding her son.
This memo was a means of exonerating Stanley McChrystal for having any kind of, culpability in any kind of cover-up, because on April 29th, he sent this P4 memo. It's a personal memo to General Abizaid, General Kinzinger, and General Brown, indicating that Pat was indeed killed by friendly fire, or at least suspected friendly fire, although he's playing with language there because they did know that they suspected it within 24 hours, but by April 29th, they knew. But he's saying that they should tell the President and the Secretary of the Army, because they were going to be making speeches at the Correspondents' Dinner that weekend, and that they didn't want him or the Secretary of the Army to make any embarrassing statements about Pat's actions if the circumstances of Pat's death were to become public. Not when the circumstances become public, but if, which suggests that they had no intention of telling us the truth unless they had to.
That was Mary Tillman, the mother of Pat Tillman, McChrystal's role in that. And also, in Iraq, when he was in charge of Black Ops for the 5 years before he became head of the Afghan war, the issue of torture.
Well, I think on the Tillman issue, in fact, an officer called me yesterday and we were chatting, and he said, he had sort of what he had heard was that, or there's this idea that was like, Tillman should have disqualified him for this job. It should have disqualified him for the job. And the fact that it didn't shows poor judgment along the way. But he was such an impressive character that they gave him a pass on this, and that really should have basically that should have ended his career. The torture, the torture allegations, this kind of stuff. He was in a business of killing. I mean, doing nasty. That's what they do. I mean, he's a warrior. He's a killer. He's hunting people down and hunting, America's enemies down in many cases. Real bad guys.
But this is prisoners who are being held at a camp in Iraq who Human Rights Watch report had put out were being tortured, and the scene of McChrystal being there. Yeah,
and I think, and he did not get dragged into that either. He sort of skated that as well. And from my conversations with people on his staff, I don't think McChrystal was a fan of these sort of enhanced interrogation.
He didn't want to be in charge of it in Afghanistan because of, well, how close he came to getting in trouble in Iraq for this.
Exactly. He thought it was he viewed detention policies as a political swamp. So I don't think, I think it's tough. What is General McChrystal's sort of morality? I mean, he gets the job done. He's willing to bend the rules to do that. I don't think, though, he would have tolerated going things too far. But we know people were punished, and we know he wasn't punished. So
ultimately, though, isn't it the fact that the counterinsurgency strategy is not going well in Afghanistan probably also had an impact on the final decision of the president, that if things were going well, the possibility of him even overlooking some of these remarks might have been there?
Oh, sure. I think that's absolutely correct. If he had not just called Marja a bleeding ulcer, a couple of weeks earlier, he'd probably still have a job. And yeah, I mean, success gets you a lot of support in Washington, and part of the trick with counterinsurgency is that you need to communicate. It's a battle of perceptions, both in Afghanistan and America, and you need to have sort of a great communicator to tell the story about why you're having success, to sort of create this narrative of success, or this narrative of like how we will reach success. And I think that, when all is said and done, General McChrystal's great failure, in fact, was this inability to communicate his strategy and what they perceived as having success. If you want to communicate a strategy of success, I would avoid using words like bleeding and ulcer.
And avoid interviews with Rolling Stone.
I welcome all interviews with Rolling Stone magazine, and I'm sure people will talk in the future.
I know that you have to race out of here because you have an interview scheduled with General Petraues later this morning. But I did just want to talk for just one moment before we wrap up and go to Congressman Conyers, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee. I wanted to just ask you, you've been reporting in Iraq and Afghanistan for 5 years now. Mm-hmm. You're quite experienced in war reporting. You've been embedded, you've not been embedded. Your fiancé was killed in Iraq, and you've set up a fund for her.
Yeah, it's called the Andy Foundation. It's a fund that helps. There's domestic sort of scholarships we give out, but we've also, along with the National Democratic Institute, have an annual fellowship where we bring a young woman from a developing nation over to Washington, D.C. to learn about human rights and democracy, and so then they can go back to their own home countries and try to institute these rule of law programs. We brought over one woman last year from Iraq. It was really incredible. She was even able to spend Christmas with the Perhamovich family. And this year we have another candidate who came over from, I believe, Burma. So the war has been pretty tough on a lot of people, and but you got to just figure out a way to sort of take what happens and go forward and try to do the best you can.
Finally, quick question on counterinsurgency. You say it's not working, but they're bringing in Petraues, who is keeping the same strategy going. Sure. Obama was very clear about this. We're changing the personnel, not the policy. Yet, right now, the end of June, more than 100 foreign troops dead in Afghanistan, vying with the top deaths in Iraq. We don't know how many Afghans are dead.
No, I think we're fighting again, Petraeus' genius in Iraq was sort of engineering this sort of face-saving withdrawal, despite the fact that I think Baghdad actually is still more violent than Kabul. But yet we've considered, people in the Beltway have convinced themselves we won in Iraq. What are we fighting? We're going to have, 2-3 more years of bloody fighting, and then we're going to draw down to maybe 50,000 troops, and we're going to end up doing sort of counterterrorism plus, which is what Vice President Biden had been advocating all along. It's just going to take us 3 years to get there.
Michael Hastings, I want to thank you for being with us. Rolling Stone reporter who wrote the piece, The Runaway General, that led to the firing of General McChrystal. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as we go to Washington.